Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about people spending so much time worrying about things that don't really matter to their training. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skill at my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Alright, when I say that people worry about things that don't matter, I'm not talking about the 80-20 rule. I'm talking about stuff that literally doesn't matter, that maybe industry and other people have convinced them matter that really don't, at least not to any significant degree. Because normally when we talk about the 80-20 rule, it's a thing that many coaches out there say that most people spend 80% of their time worrying about stuff that only contributes to 20% of their results. Whether that's muscle gain, fat loss, whatever it is that they're pursuing, or increased performance. They spend most of the time worrying about stuff that matters the least. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean, that's already a phenomenon, that's a problem, but there are also a lot of people out there who focus on things that don't contribute meaningfully at all. And I'll give you guys some examples and to let people know that, hey, step back and ask yourself at certain times, is the stuff that you're worrying about, these minutiae, oftentimes pseudoscience, does it actually really matter? Because usually that's what it comes down to. It's usually pseudoscience of some type. And I'll give you a perfect example. People worrying about fluctuations in their hormone levels. Worrying about things like, well, this sort of training might release more testosterone or more growth hormone or whatever. Whatever it is that they're pursuing. What does the research on this say? Well, the meta-analysis that we had a few years ago that looked at several dozen studies on this, you know what they found? They found that the amount of testosterone and growth hormone that the body produces as a result of training, there was no correlation with the amount of muscle people were gaining. Meaning people who gained less or more testosterone didn't gain less or more muscle. There was no correlation found. It was just an even spread as far as the amount that they produce in training. Same with growth hormone. These little transient fluctuations in your hormones don't matter. In fact, people spending too much time worrying about hormones and, oh, I shouldn't eat this after I train or that after I train because it might blunt my growth hormone response. All the studies say these responses don't affect training or adaptation to training. They don't affect muscle growth. They don't affect any of this stuff. It doesn't matter. And it's not saying that testosterone in your body, even what you produce, doesn't matter. It doesn't say that those things don't matter. But what you do to try to stimulate or what you do that might blunt them probably doesn't matter unless you're going pretty extreme with it. Meaning, when you're cutting, your testosterone and your growth hormone levels go down, your IGF-1 levels go down. When you're losing body fat, well, there you're effectively controlling it, but it's a massive reduction in some of these things, enough so that you stop gaining muscle. That's pretty straightforward, but you know, most people when they're losing weight, unless they're a noob, don't expect to be gaining muscle when they're dropping 1.5 pounds of body fat every week. That's normal, but worrying about these things doesn't really matter. And in fact, worrying about little things that you do that might affect growth hormone or testosterone pulses in your body, they don't matter. This is pseudoscience, and the only reason people care about these things is because bodybuilders and athletes use exogenous hormones like this, and because that's such an important focus there, people assume that what your body's producing, that you can manipulate it in some way to do that. And companies have marketed to that, and they cater to that. They focus on that, of convincing people of these things. Same thing with insulin. All right. Everyone always worries about insulin response, glycemic index. Oh, this food might cause higher circulating insulin. It might cause you to store fat. All right. Well, first of all, insulin is actually anabolic. Having decent circulating insulin levels when you're losing body fat can actually help you hold on to muscle mass better. There's a reason there have been studies that show that ketogenic diets don't produce as good of muscle retention or as good of a recomposition effect for noobs when they're in a caloric deficit or when they're losing body fat. There's a reason these studies show that. Circulating insulin is actually anabolic, but you shouldn't really be focusing on it because here's the thing, everyone worries about insulin spikes and everything else. These large fluctuations in insulin response in the body are a result of people being sedentary and sick. What people need to understand, people who don't eat really bad diets, people who exercise and who are physically active don't get a big insulin response from eating white rice, for example. All right, there's a reason you don't see obesity in countries where people eat predominantly white rice as a primary calorie. You don't see obesity in those countries. Why? Because they don't see the big insulin response you're talking about. It's people who eat too much saturated fat or too much fructose or both, and who are sedentary, that develop insulin resistance. And it's insulin resistance that causes your body to have these big surges in insulin. You can't spike your insulin. Same thing, people worry about, oh, I'm going to spike my insulin after I train. Well, actually, right after you train, your GI tract is absorbing the slowest it possibly can during training and after training. You're not getting some big insulin spike by consuming a bunch of sugar. That's a myth. That's a myth perpetuated to sell products. Worrying about your insulin levels when you're healthy and fit and athletic and you train, you lift weights and do cardio and eat a decent diet with a fair amount of fiber in it, you shouldn't be concerned at all about your circulating insulin. It's a waste of time. This is stuff you need to be worried about when you're type 2 diabetic because you've had a really shitty lifestyle. Athletic, active people who don't have medical issues related to insulin response, that have been diagnosed by a medical doctor, you don't need to worry about this shit. People waste their time worrying about things that don't matter. How about stuff like worrying about, oh, my muscle fiber composition? People ask me that all the time. In fact, I've seen jackasses, and I can't even remember who it was. Was it, oh, what's his name? Was it Simeon Panda might have been the guy? I can't even remember. It was either Simeon Panda or what's that other dude? Ulysses or someone. It was someone had went and got this, paid for this genetic testing, and it came back and talked to them about their muscle fiber distribution. And there, people are worried about, well, people with more fast twitch fiber. Okay, there is no human being on earth with more fast twitch fibers and slow twitch fibers. We're an endurance-oriented species. We don't have very many fast twitch fibers. Some of us have more than others, so we would call that dominant, but they're still mostly, the vast majority of their muscle fibers are slow twitch. But this idea that maybe you should train different rep ranges due to your muscle fiber distribution and genetic testing for this sort of stuff, really, guys, this is bullshit. There's no evidence whatsoever that rep range, you grow more from any given rep range because of your genetics. All right, there's no reason to think that. All rep ranges are capable of producing maximum muscle growth if work done is sufficient. All right. Meaning, in other words, you can take any muscle in your body and you can make it grow as fast as it possibly can grow in a week without any anabolics or anything. You can do it as long as work is sufficient. You could do it with 3 rep sets. You could do it with 10 rep sets. You could do it with 20 rep sets. Doesn't matter. It can be hit with any of those as long as you do enough work to stimulate maximum muscle growth. All right? It can be done with any of those. It can be done even with concentric only training, meaning where you only lift the weight and then drop it and don't lower it under control. It can be done with eccentric only training where you lower the weight only and have a machine lift it. All right, this has been studied. People can gain maximum muscle mass with every single extreme of these things. As long as the total work done is sufficient and there is progressive overload present, you can gain maximum muscle mass with any of these things. There is no such thing as a true hypertrophy range. There is no such thing as the stuff that people are looking at. It's all about total work done. And the reason we rotate through these things has to do with performance elements and preventing stalls and adaptation in your body just stopping growing as a result of certain training styles or stalling for a while. That's the only reason we change these things up, or for specific performance elements. But most of that isn't necessary if people's only goal is to gain size. They just need to do sufficient work, get sufficient sleep and food and recovery in, and they will grow maximally. It actually isn't that difficult. Training for size is the easiest style of training to do because there's a wide variety of methods that can get you the exact same results. It's the least complex goal to achieve as far as lifting goes compared to most athletic endeavors. But people worry about muscle fiber distribution. And on that, by that same token, how about people who sit around worrying about squeezing and contracting? Let me ask you a question. Do you honestly think squeezing your bicep like this as hard as I can, do you really think that stimulates significant muscle growth? Do you really think that it does? Show me a guy who looks like a bodybuilder or looks like a power lifter who does nothing but squeezing their muscles all the time, who carry that sort of size. They don't, because it doesn't have enough resistance to do anything. It might help you get the muscle a little more toned, And yes, that is an actual term. People say toning's not real. Yeah, actually it is, but you get the same effect from lifting weights also. So you wouldn't need to do it if you're lifting. But yeah, muscle tone is a nervous system condition that medical doctors look at when they're assessing patients and checking for certain neurological disorders. It actually has a medical meaning. But the point is, they worry about squeezing and all of that, and it's like, but then they'll worry about that, and then they wonder why they don't have big biceps. And then they'll see some guy who they know who is strong as fuck on weighted chin-ups and barbell rows and the bench press, and then he'll have big arms, way bigger arms than them, and he doesn't worry about it. There's guys who don't do any curls or tricep extensions, and they don't squeeze or do anything like that, who have big arms, those same muscles. Why? Because they're doing a lot of work. It is workload that stimulates muscle growth, not squeezing and contracting the muscle. It's how much work that muscle does. That's what matters. And people get caught up in other minutiae and bullshit because they saw some bodybuilder talk about it. Really? If all these bodybuilders knew so much about getting big biceps and arms, why do so many of them have to do 7 different exercises for them, and why do they inject shit into them? Because almost every competitive bodybuilder, every pro bodybuilder you meet, and when you really talk to them about site injection, they all do site injection into their arms. They all put oil of some type in there, whether it's synthol or just site shooting their gear. All right. If these guys knew that much about all this arm development, why do they have to have so much fake muscle in there? Stop and think on that. These guys don't always know what the fuck they're talking about. But the reality is, squeezing and contracting a muscle, just again, the sort of silly shit that people worry about, would contribute very, very little, if anything, to your muscle size. Sometimes feeling a muscle, it just means that you're not cheating. You're actually using decent form on an isolation movement, and you're not cheating and swinging the weight up. So you'll feel it more when you use stricter form. So the people talking about a mind-muscle connection, that just means using good form. That just means using good form. That's all it means. Because you feel it more if you're using good form. Meaning, if you're doing a concentration curl controlled, or a preacher curl down on a bench and going all the way down, aren't you going to feel your bicep more than if you do this shit with some silly ass cheat curls, guys? Of course you do. Because the bicep's doing more work instead of your shoulders and your traps and your front delts doing all the work. So yeah, you're actually working the bicep, so you feel it more. That's not a mind-muscle connection. That's just using good form and going all the way down, doing the whole exercise. Again, people focus on things that don't matter, that are a complete waste of time due to all sorts of silly pseudoscientific bullshit. Focus on what matters. Focus on what matters. And when you start focusing on anything that you're doing with training and your diet, it's a good thing to step back and ask, wait a minute, I'm trying to do this, but what I'm doing, is it really going to affect my results? Is this actually matter, or is just some silly shit or silly ritual or silly idea I'm worrying about in my head that doesn't actually matter in the real world? That's something we need to step back and assess from time to time. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.